The morning looks like every other morning. The sky over the Sinai Peninsula is the color of pale bone. The rocks are still cold from the night. A shepherd moves across the far side of the desert, staff in hand, sandals worn thin, watching a flock of goats pick their way between stones that have not moved in 10,000 years. He is 80 years old. He has been doing this for 40 years. Before that, he was a prince in Egypt. Before that, he was a murderer running for his life. He has buried that life so deep he almost believes it never happened. His name is Moses, and he has no idea that the next 10 minutes will change the history of the human race. He sees the fire from a distance. Brush fires happen in the desert. What is unusual is that he keeps watching, and the bush keeps burning, and nothing burns down. A minute passes, then another. The bush is still there, still burning, still green inside the flame. Moses turns toward it, and that turning is the moment everything begins. Here's what most people miss about this scene. The text in Exodus chapter 3 says that God spoke to Moses from within the fire only after Moses turned to look. God was waiting to see if this 80-year-old shepherd, this broken man, this fugitive from his own past, would stop, turn his head, and pay attention to something that did not make sense. He did. And God spoke. Now, before we go any further, I need to plant something in your mind. There is one moment in this entire story, one fire, one specific fire in the scripture where God shows up, and the text tells us plainly that God was not in the flame. And when we get to that fire, everything you think you know about what God is saying when he shows up in fire is going to shift. We will get there, but not yet, because first we need to understand what we are actually looking at. This is not a story about destruction. This is not a story about judgment. This is not a story about raw power on display for its own sake. This is a story about what God does when he has something so important to say that ordinary speech will not hold it. When the word is too heavy for a whisper, when the message is so urgent that he needs you to stop walking, stop working, stop pretending you do not hear and look up, fire does that. Fire always does that. You do not casually walk past a burning bush. You do not glance at a pillar of flame and keep moving. You do not stand at the foot of a mountain pouring out smoke and fire and think, I will deal with that later. Fire demands your attention. Fire says, something is happening here that is more important than whatever you were doing a moment ago. And across the entire sweep of Scripture, from the covenant God sealed with Abraham in the dark, to the tongues of flame that fell on 120 people in an upper room in Jerusalem, to the blazing eyes of the risen Christ, as John fell face down on a volcanic island in the Aegean Sea, every time God shows up in fire, he is not performing. He is speaking. The question this video is going to answer is, what is he saying? And the answer, when you see it, is the same word. Every single time. Stay with me. Let's go back further than Moses, further than Egypt. Back to a night in Canaan, around 2000 BC, when a man named Abraham sat in the dark and waited for God to show up. He had been waiting a long time. God had made him a promise years earlier. Abraham would have a son. From that son would come descendants as numerous as the stars. Through those descendants, every nation on earth would be blessed. It was the kind of promise that sounds like poetry until you are the one waiting for it to come true. Abraham's wife Sarah was barren. They were old. The years kept passing. And the promise kept sitting there, enormous and silent. So Abraham asks God for proof. Not arrogantly, the way a man asks when he has been hoping so long that hope itself has started to hurt. Lord God, how can I know that I will gain possession of it? And God says, bring me animals, a heifer, a goat, a ram, a dove, a pigeon. Abraham brings them. He cuts them in half. He lays the halves across from each other on the ground, making a corridor between the pieces. This was how covenants were made in the ancient world. Both parties would walk between the divided animals, a declaration that said, "If either of us breaks this agreement, may what happened to these animals happen to us." The most serious promise a human being could make. Then something happens that should stop you cold. As the sun goes down, God causes Abraham to fall into a deep sleep. A thick and dreadful darkness comes over him. Abraham is unconscious. He cannot walk anywhere. He cannot hold up his end of the agreement because he has no end to hold up. He is asleep on the ground while God speaks promises over him in the dark. And then a smoking firepot and a blazing torch appear, and they pass between the pieces alone. God walks through the covenant by himself. Pay attention to this. In the ancient Near East, if one party could not walk through the pieces, the covenant was void. But God does not require Abraham's participation. God takes both sides of the agreement. God says, in effect, "I will keep this promise even if you cannot, even if it costs me everything, even if the only way to fulfill it is to become the broken sacrifice, myself." You are watching, in Genesis 15, the first shadow of the cross. The fire between those pieces is God signing his name in flame to a promise he intends to keep across 4,000 years of human history. And wherever you are sitting right now, you are one of the descendants that fire was promising. You are part of what that blazing torch was walking toward in the dark. That is what the first fire says. I will keep my word, even if it kills me. But it gets stranger. Move forward 400 years. The descendants of Abraham are slaves in Egypt. They have been slaves so long that most of them have forgotten they were ever anything else. They make bricks under a sun that does not care about them. They cry out to a God they are not entirely sure is still listening. And then one morning on the far side of the Sinai desert, an 80-year-old shepherd turns to look at a bush that is on fire and not burning down. We are back to Moses. But now you are seeing him differently. Because Moses is not just a man who wandered into a divine encounter on a random morning. Moses is the answer to 400 years of prayers. And the fire in that bush burning and not consuming is saying something that has never been said quite this way before. The Hebrew word for fire is esh. It appears over 375 times in the Old Testament. Scholars have noted that its root is connected in some rabbinic traditions to the verb to be, the same verb at the heart of God's name when he tells Moses, "I am who I am." Fire, in Hebrew thought, is not just combustion, it is presence, the visible form of a being so alive that it radiates energy without effort. The burning bush is not a magic trick. It is a theology lesson. The bush burns and is not consumed because the fire in it is not destructive. It is the fire of God's own being, alive, radiant, present, resting on something ordinary and not destroying it. A desert shrub, common, unremarkable. The kind of plant you walk past 100 times without looking twice. And God chooses that. God says to Moses, through the burning and the not consuming, "I can rest my presence on ordinary things and not destroy them. I can rest my presence on you." Moses takes off his sandals. He is standing on holy ground. Not because the ground changed, because the presence arrived. And then God speaks, "I have seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I have heard them crying out. I am concerned about their suffering, so I have come down to rescue them. I have seen, I have heard, I am concerned, I have come down." 4 statements, each one more personal than the last. This is not the language of a distant deity managing human affairs from a safe remove. This is the language of someone who has been watching, who has been listening, who has been grieved by what he has seen, and who has decided that enough is enough. The fire in the bush is God saying, "I see you. I have always seen you, and I am not staying up here while you suffer down there." Moses says, "Please send someone else. He is afraid, 80 years old, a stammer, away from Egypt for 4 decades, nobody tending goats on the wrong side of the desert." And God is asking him to walk back into the most powerful empire on earth and demand the release of 2 million slaves. But the fire does not go out while Moses argues. God simply says, "I will be with you," and somehow that is enough. Moses picks up his staff, he turns toward Egypt, and everything that follows the plagues, the parted sea, the manna, the law on the mountain, everything flows from one 80-year-old man who turned to look at a fire and did not walk away. But not every fire story ends with a commission. Some end in silence and grief. And 4 of the most sobering verses in the entire Old Testament. Their names were Nadab and Abihu, sons of Aaron, priests of Israel. They had been at Sinai. They had seen the fire on the mountain. They knew who God was. And then in Leviticus 10, they offered fire that God had not commanded. Were they drunk? The text hints at it. Were they treating the holy like it was ordinary? Yes. That much is clear. Fire came out from the presence of the Lord and consumed them. 4 verses. That is all Leviticus gives them. 4 verses for 2 lives, 2 deaths, and a silence so heavy their father Aaron cannot speak. The Hebrew word for presence here is panim, which means face. The fire came from God's face. The same fire that burned in the bush, the same fire that walked between the pieces in Genesis 15, the fire of pure being, of absolute holiness, cannot coexist with pretense. Nadab and Abihu brought false fire into the presence of the one who is presence. And the fire said, "I am not a performance. I am not a concept you can handle carelessly. I am real. And what is real cannot pretend." The fire says, "I am here, and here is not a safe distance." Now 2 million people, that is the number scholars estimate, made the exodus from Egypt. Moving at night, the desert cold and dark and the paths invisible, so God gave them fire. Exodus 13 verse 21. By day the Lord went ahead of them in a pillar of cloud to guide their way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, so that they could travel by day or night. A column of fire tall enough for 2 million people to see, moving, deliberate, placed at the front of the longest, most terrifying journey a human population had ever attempted, saying, "Follow me." The Hebrew word kavod, glory, literally means weight, heaviness. The pillar of fire was the kavod made visible. The answer to the question every one of those 2 million people must have been asking in the dark, is anyone actually leading this? Does anyone know where we are going? The fire said, "Yes, I do, and I am going first. You have been in that desert, the place where the path ahead is invisible and the thing behind you is terrifying, and you are responsible for people counting on you to know which way to go. And you did not know, and the darkness felt total." Here is what the pillar of fire says to that moment. God does not send directions from a distance. He goes ahead. He is already at the place you are afraid of. The fire moves first and the people follow the fire. You will never arrive somewhere he has not already been. And this is where it gets remarkable. The fire does not go out. 40 years of wandering, 40 years of complaining and doubting and demanding to go back to Egypt. Every night, every single night of 40 years, the fire was there, saying the same thing it had been saying since the burning bush. "I am here. I am not leaving. I see you, even now." And then comes the mountain, Mount Sinai. Exodus 19 verse 18. Mount Sinai was covered in smoke because the Lord descended on it in fire. The smoke billowed up like smoke from a furnace, and the whole mountain trembled violently. Josephus, the first-century Jewish historian, writing in his Antiquities of the Jews, describes the terror at Sinai in a detail not in the biblical text, but ringing with the memory of a people who never forgot. He writes that the Israelites were convinced they were witnessing the end of the world. They had seen fire before, but not fire that shook the ground, not fire that filled the sky and made the mountain tremble. And yet Moses goes up, To the Israelites watching from below, the glory of the Lord on top of the mountain looked like a consuming fire. Kavod, the unbearable weight of presence, visible as flame. Moses walked into it, 40 days and 40 nights. He came back down with his face literally radiating light because he had been that close to the fire for that long. What was God doing in the fire on Sinai, forming a nation? Taking a people who had been slaves with no framework for freedom, no code of ethics, and burning something into them, not destroying them, shaping them. A blacksmith uses fire to make a blade, not to destroy the metal, to reveal what the metal can become. The heat removes the impurities. What comes out is harder, sharper, more useful than anything that went in. The fire on Sinai was God the blacksmith, and Israel was the metal in his hands. Hold that thought, because the next fire takes place 500 years later, on a different mountain, with everything on the line. His name is Elijah. The northern kingdom of Israel has been drifting from God for years. King Ahab, weak and manipulated, married to Jezebel, a woman who has imported the worship of Baal into Israel with political force and religious cruelty. She has killed the prophets of God. She has convinced most of Israel that Baal, the storm god, controls the weather. And God has answered her claim with 3 years of drought. Elijah walks back into Israel after 3 years in hiding and tells Ahab to gather the people on Mount Carmel, all of them, and bring the 450 prophets of Baal. This is not a debate. This is a test. 2 altars, 2 bulls, 2 prayers. Whichever God answers by fire, that is the real one. The prophets of Baal go first. They pray from morning until noon. Nothing. They dance around the altar. Nothing. Elijah mocks them. Shout louder. Maybe your God is traveling. Maybe he is asleep. They shout louder. They cut themselves with swords. Blood runs down their arms. By late afternoon, nothing. The altar is cold. Then Elijah steps forward. He rebuilds the altar of the Lord, 12 stones, 1 for each tribe. A trench around the altar, the wood, the bull. And then he does something that makes no tactical sense. 12 jars of water poured over the altar, 3 rounds. In the middle of a 3-year drought, soaking an altar, he is about to ask God to light on fire. He is not making it easier for God. He is making it impossible for anyone to say it was a trick. Then Elijah prays, 37 words in the Hebrew, no ritual, no cutting. Just a man who knows who he is talking to, saying clearly what he needs. Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are God in Israel. Answer me, so these people will know that you are God, and that you are turning their hearts back again. 37 words. That is all. And the fire of the Lord fell. It burned up the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, the soil. It licked up the water in the trench. The people fell face down. The Lord, he is God. The Lord, he is God. The fire on Carmel said, I answer. I show up when called by the right name. I do not share my altar with anything that is not real. Here's the part nobody tells you. The very next chapter, Elijah is under a broom tree in the desert, asking God to let him die. The man who watched fire fall from heaven on a soaked altar is sitting alone in the wilderness, broken. Jezebel has issued a death threat. The victory on Carmel has not changed the political situation. The loneliness of being the only one left who will say the true thing out loud has finally broken him. An angel touches him, gives him food, water, says, the journey is too much for you. Rest, eat, and then Elijah walks 40 days to Mount Horeb, the same mountain as Sinai, and crawls into a cave. God says, what are you doing here, Elijah? And Elijah says the truest, saddest thing, I am the only one left, and they are trying to kill me too. God says, go stand on the mountain. I am about to pass by. And this is the moment we have been building toward since the very beginning of this video. The one fire I told you about. The fire where God is not in the flame. A great wind comes that tears the mountains apart and shatters rocks. But the Lord is not in the wind. After the wind, an earthquake. But the Lord is not in the earthquake. After the earthquake, fire. On the same mountain where fire had once made the ground shake, and the people beg for Moses to go in their place. But the Lord is not in the fire. And after the fire, a still small voice, a gentle whisper, barely audible, the kind of sound you only hear if you are very quiet and very close. Why was God not in the fire at Horeb? Because Elijah did not need fire. Elijah had seen fire. He had called it down from heaven with 37 words. Fire was not going to heal what was broken in him. Fire speaks to crowds. Fire splits nations. Fire answers the challenge of 450 prophets on a mountain. But a whisper is for one person. A whisper requires closeness. You cannot whisper from a distance. A whisper means, I am right here, right next to you. Close enough that you can hear me even when your voice is gone and your strength is spent and you have nothing left to offer. The still small voice at Horeb is not God's absence from fire. It is God's presence beyond fire. God saying to Elijah and to you, if you are in the cave right now, if you are exhausted and alone and convinced you are the only one left, I do not always speak in the way that impresses crowds. Sometimes I speak in the register that only a broken person can hear. Now watch what happens next. Across the centuries, on a plain in Babylon, 3 young men are about to walk into a fire that is not metaphorical at all. And what God does in that fire will answer, once and for all, the deepest question the fire has been asking since Genesis 15. Their names are Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Jewish. Young teenagers or early 20s when they arrived in Babylon as exiles after Nebuchadnezzar sacked Jerusalem. Trained in Babylonian language and literature. Given new names, slowly and systematically remade into Babylonians. And they have resisted, quietly, consistently, at personal cost. But this is not quiet anymore. Nebuchadnezzar has built a statue, 90 feet tall, gold-plated. When you hear the music, you will fall down and worship the image. Whoever does not fall down will be thrown into a blazing furnace. The music plays. Everyone falls down, except 3 young men. They are brought before Nebuchadnezzar. He gives them one more chance. What God will be able to rescue you from my hand? The voice of an empire that has never lost, asking a small group of exiles to name the deity they think can compete with Babylon. And Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego say something that has been quoted in prison cells and hospital site, rooms and hospices and refugee camps for 2,500 years. King Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from your hand. But even if he does not, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up. 3 sentences. The first, we are not afraid of your question. The second, our God can save us. The third, the one that has kept people alive in impossible situations for millennia, but even if he does not, our answer is the same. 4 words that contain an entire theology. Our faithfulness is not contingent on our rescue. Our trust is not a transaction. We are not serving God because we expect protection from every consequence. We are serving God because he is God. And that is reason enough, regardless of what the furnace does. Nebuchadnezzar orders the furnace heated 7 times hotter than normal. So hot the soldiers who throw the 3 men in die from the heat before they can step back. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego fall into the fire bound. And then Nebuchadnezzar leaps to his feet. Weren't there 3 men we tied up and threw into the fire? Yes, 3. Look, I see 4 men walking around in the fire, unbound and unharmed. And the 4th looks like a son of the gods. 4 men walking in the fire, unbound, the ropes burned away by the same heat that cannot touch their skin. And a 4th figure, unannounced, unnamed, walking with them in the fire, as if fire were a perfectly ordinary place to take a walk. Who is the fourth figure? The text does not say explicitly. The early church fathers were unanimous. This is a pre-incarnate appearance of Christ, the Son of God, walking in the fire with his people before he ever walked in Galilee. And here is what that means. The fire that God has been speaking in across all of human history has a person inside it. There has always been a person inside it. From the burning bush to the pillar in the desert to the mountain smoking at Sinai, the fire has not been an impersonal force. It has been a presence, the presence that would one day have a face and a name and hands that could be nailed to wood. The fourth figure in the furnace is the answer to the question the fire has been asking since Genesis 15. Who is walking through the covenant? Who is going through the fire first so you do not have to go through it alone? The same one who has always been there. Before you knew his name, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego come out of the furnace. The officials crowd around them, not a hair singed, not a thread scorched. And the text gives us one of the most specific, most arresting details in all of Daniel. They did not even smell of smoke. You have been in fires that left you smelling like smoke for years, relationships that burned you, losses that left a scorch mark on everything you touched, seasons that felt like a furnace with no door. And you came out carrying the smell of what happened to you, wearing it in ways you could not always explain. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out and smelled like nothing, like morning air, like they had been somewhere clean, because the fire did not touch them. The only thing the fire burned was the ropes. What are the ropes in your life right now? What is binding you that the furnace might actually be burning away while you are convinced the fire is destroying you? There is one more fire, the one that changes the direction of everything. Jerusalem. 50 days after the resurrection, 120 people in a room, disciples, Mary, the mother of Jesus, his brothers, women who had followed him from Galilee. They have been waiting. Jesus told them to wait. He told them a promise was coming. They do not know exactly what they are waiting for. A sound like a violent rushing wind fills the entire house, and what appears above each of them looks like tongues of fire. Not one fire for the group, individual flames, one for each person, separating, coming to rest on each of them specifically. The Greek word for fire in Acts 2 is pyr, the same root as our word pure. Fire in the Greek imagination, as in the Hebrew, was the great purifier burning away dross and leaving only what was real. The tongues of fire at Pentecost were not a light show. They were the mark of purification, the mark of presence descending not on a mountain, not on a bush, not on an altar, but on a person, on each person individually. Think about the distance that fire has traveled. In Genesis 15, it walked through the covenant alone. Abraham was not ready to hold up his end. In Exodus 3, it rested on a bush, something ordinary, close to where humans live. In Exodus 13, it went before the people leading them, going first. On Sinai, it descended on a mountain holy ground the people could not approach. In Babylon, it surrounded 3 people inside a furnace. And at Pentecost, it lands on each person, in the city, in the room, on every head. The fire that began at a cosmic distance has traveled all the way to you. Eusebius, the 4th century church historian, writing in his ecclesiastical history, traces the fire of Pentecost back through every fire of the Old Testament and argues that the same God who spoke in fire to Moses and Elijah is the God who speaks in fire at Pentecost. Not a new fire, but the same fire, finally arriving where it was always going. Not on a mountain, in a person. The presence that once required a mountain to contain it, the kavod, the unbearable weight of glory, has been made small enough to rest on you, not to destroy you, to rest on you the way it rested on the burning bush, burning, bright, real, and not consuming what it rests on. And then there is John, old now, the last of the original 12 still alive. Exiled to a small volcanic island in the Aegean Sea called Patmos, where the Roman Empire sent people it wanted to silence without the inconvenience of executing them publicly. John is there because he will not stop talking about Jesus. He is praying on a Sunday morning when he hears a voice behind him like a trumpet. He turns, and what he sees drops him to the ground like a dead man. Someone standing among 7 golden lampstands, robed, hair white as wool, and his eyes were like blazing fire. Like blazing fire. The same fire. The same esh. The same pyre. The same consuming, purifying, covenant-keeping, people-leading, furnace-inhabiting, Pentecost-falling fire, now with a human face. In eyes that have wept at a graveside in Bethany. That looked with compassion at a leper on a road in Galilee. That stayed open through 6 hours of suffering on a cross outside Jerusalem. The fire has a face. The fire has always had a face, and now John can see it. The face of the one he walked with for 3 years. The one who broke bread with him. The one who said, "Do not be afraid," to him on a stormy lake in the dark. The same voice, after everything. That voice says to John on the black rock of Patmos, "Do not be afraid. I am the first and the last. I am the living one. I was dead, and now look, I am alive forever and ever. Do not be afraid." The fire says it again. The fire has always been saying it. Now, there is a man who lived in the 4th century whose story does not involve a burning bush or a pillar of fire or a furnace in Babylon. His story involves a garden in Milan, a child's voice through a wall, and 4 verses of a letter written by a man who had been in prison. His name is Augustine, and his story is the still small voice after the fire. Augustine was brilliant. He was also, by his own account, a mess. Spent his 20s chasing everything the ancient world offered: pleasure, philosophy, status. He had a son by a woman he never married. He tried religion and found it hollow. Moved to Rome, then Milan, seeking something he could not name. His mother Monica followed him, praying with a persistence that the Bishop Ambrose told her was impossible to ignore, that a son of so many tears could not be lost. Augustine knew the Christian God intellectually, had sat under the preaching of Ambrose, and found it compelling and personally impossible. He could not make himself surrender. He knew what it would cost. He prayed. He later wrote, "Lord, make me chaste, but not yet." He wanted God the way you want something you are also afraid of. He wanted the fire. He just did not want to be changed by it. Then one afternoon in a garden in Milan, sitting outside, unable to read, weeping without knowing why, he hears a child's voice from beyond the wall, singing a simple phrase over and over, "Tolle legge," take up and read. He goes back to Paul's letter. His eyes fall on a passage. He reads it once. And something in him, something locked for 32 years, opens. He does not describe flames. No vision, no voice from heaven. Something quieter and more devastating. A light of certainty flooding his heart. Darkness scattering. Something wrong for a very long time becoming, in a single moment, right. The restless heart inquietum, he calls it, found its rest, not in fire, in a whisper. In a child's song through a wall and 4 verses of a letter and a garden in the afternoon, this is what Elijah's still small voice looks like in the 4th century. God not in the wind, not in the earthquake, not in the fire, but in the barely audible thing that only a person who has run out of options can hear. And now, after everything we have seen, I want to ask you something. Where have you seen the fire? Not theologically, specifically, in your own life, the moment that burned without consuming you, the season that felt like a furnace and you came out not destroyed but different, lighter, like something that had been holding you had been burned away. Because not one fire in this video was primarily about destruction, not one. Abraham's fire sealed a promise. Moses' fire commissioned a deliverer. The pillar led a people through darkness. Sinai formed a nation. Carmel answered a question the nation needed answered. Horeb taught a prophet that God's presence is not always loud. The furnace revealed the fourth figure who had been there all along. Pentecost moved the presence of God from a mountain into a person. The fire in John's vision showed that the face of God is not an abstraction. Every fire was a word, and the word was always the same. I am here. I see you. I am with you in this. I will not let the fire destroy what I am making. I am the one already in the furnace before you arrive. I am the one going before you in the darkness. I sealed the covenant alone so you would never have to hold it together yourself. There is a verse in Zechariah chapter 2, verse 5, where God makes a promise so tender, it almost does not sound like the same God who shook Sinai. I myself will be a wall of fire around it, and I will be its glory within. A wall of fire. Not fire that destroys what is outside, fire that protects what is inside. Saying to everything that would harm you, you have to come through me first. And the glory within the kavod not resting on a mountain at a distance, but inside, dwelling within, close. Hebrews ends its great argument with a sentence that sounds terrifying if you read it wrong. Our God is a consuming fire. Most people read that as a warning, but after everything we have seen, it is not a warning, it is a description. The most honest thing the Bible says about who God is, He is fire. He is the kind of presence that burns. That radiates. That consumes, yes, but the way a refiner's fire consumes, burning away the dross, the pretense, the things that are not real, leaving what is. Malachi 3 asks, "Who can endure the day of his coming? For he will be like a refiner's fire." The answer, 3 verses later, the ones who survive come out pure, not destroyed, refined, made into what they were always meant to be. The fire is not coming to end you. The fire is coming to finish you, to burn away everything that is not you, the fear that has been running your life, the shame that has been writing your story, the lies you have believed so long they feel like facts, and to leave what is real. The image of God in you, which no furnace has ever been able to touch. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego did not smell like smoke when they came out. The fire could not touch what God had made. It could only touch the ropes. The fourth figure is already in the furnace with you. He was there before you arrived. He will be there when the door opens. And when you walk out, you will not smell like smoke. You will smell like morning. So, let's land this. From a night in Canaan where a smoking firepot walked alone between divided animals in the dark, to a desert in Sinai where a bush burned and did not burn down, to a pillar of fire that led 2 million people through 40 years of wilderness and never went out, to a mountain so full of divine fire the ground shook and the people begged to send someone else, to a soaked altar on Carmel where 37 words brought fire from a cloudless sky, to a cave on Horeb where the fire was absent and the whisper was everything, to a furnace in Babylon where 3 young men walked in bound and came out free, to an upper room in Jerusalem where fire landed on each person individually, to a volcanic island where an old man fell face down before eyes like blazing fire and heard, "Do not be afraid." Every fire, every time, the same word. 3 things to take with you. The first, every fire God shows up in is a word, and the word has never been about destruction, not once. From the covenant fire in Genesis to the blazing eyes in Revelation, every fire is an act of communication. God is not silent. God is not distant. He speaks. And sometimes the only language loud enough to cut through the noise of everything competing for your attention is fire. Not to frighten you, because He has something too important to say, and you are not slowing down enough to hear it any other way. The second, you have already been in a fire. Maybe you are in one right now. The question that matters is not why the fire came or whether you deserved it. The question is whether you have noticed the fourth figure walking beside you in it. He was there before the door closed. He is there right now. The ropes, the things that were binding you before the furnace, those are what the fire is for. Not you. The fire cannot touch what God has made in His image. It can only touch what was never supposed to be there. And the third, the one I want you to carry out of this video and into whatever you are walking into tomorrow. The fire is still speaking. The same presence that rested on a thorn bush in the Sinai desert and did not burn it down. The same presence that walked between divided animals in the dark and sealed a promise at any cost. The same presence that led a terrified people through 40 years of wilderness. That walked into a furnace with 3 young men who refused to bow. That landed on 120 ordinary people and turned them into the ones who carried the news to the ends of the earth. That looked at an old man on a black volcanic rock and said, with eyes like blazing fire, "Do not be afraid." That presence has not gone anywhere. That fire has not gone out, and it is not finished speaking. Whatever furnace you are standing at the edge of, whatever wilderness you are navigating by a light you can barely see, whatever cave you have crawled into, the fire is not done with you. The word is not finished. The covenant is still sealed. The fourth figure is still walking. The fire is not coming to destroy you. The fire is coming to say, "I am here. I have always been here. I see you. I know your name. I sealed the covenant alone in the dark so you would never have to hold it together yourself. I walked through the furnace before you arrived. I went before you through the wilderness. I rested on the ordinary thing and did not consume it. I will not consume you. I am here, and I am not leaving." Which fire in this video hit you the hardest? Was it the bush that burned without burning down? The furnace in Babylon and the fourth figure nobody expected? The still small voice after Elijah's greatest victory? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And if this video opens something in you today, share it with someone who needs to hear it. You already know who that person is. The fire is still speaking. The only question is whether you are still listening.